We're here today joined by the CBTU, Canada's Building Trade Unions, to speak about an important legislative fix that will correct a long-standing tax unfairness to workers in the building construction trades. That will help improve conditions for better regional labor mobility to those workers, as well as improve the access of construction businesses and employers to an effectively larger pool of qualified tradespeople. In the House of Commons yesterday, we tabled Bill C-275, an act to amend the Income Tax Act. It's about travel and accommodation deduction for tradespersons. This is in addition to NDP labor rights bills, which have accompanied my bills on preventing pension theft in the case of bankruptcies, as well as my anti-scab legislation. Let me start by telling you why this newly tabled bill on tax fairness and labor mobility is important. Those working hard in the construction and building trades who literally have built and continue to build our country oftentimes have to make the sacrifice to travel from their normal place of living and work to remote job sites in order to get or maintain their work. It is common for construction companies to take on contracts that are not in the immediate area where they normally do business. It is also common for workers who have to take their work with different construction companies, some of which are not based in their immediate vicinity in order to make a living. This is commonplace. There is an existing clause in the tax code, 8(1)H of the Income Tax Act, which allows workers who have expenses related to travel for work to apply for an income tax deduction. The CRA decided some time ago that because of the nature of their work on job sites, they will not allow workers like those in the building trades to apply for this tax deduction. This technicality not only excludes building and construction tradespeople from a tax deduction that others can avail, it perpetuates a disincentive for them to take work, and in some cases prevents these workers from avoiding the use of social programs like employment insurance. My bill will fix this. My bill, which is an updated version of one that the NDP has put forward in several sessions of Parliament, starting back in 2006, would create a clause to allow travel expenses for a duly qualified tradesperson or an apprentice so that they can secure and maintain employment in a construction activity at a job site that is located away from their ordinary place of residence. I'd like to state clearly why I believe support for this bill is a no-brainer. One, brings tax fairness to the hardliners in the building and construction trades, allowing them to finally have access to a tax deduction already available to those traveling for work rather than to job sites, improves the labor mobility conditions, and 3, facilitates an increase to the pool of skilled tradespersons for construction companies and employers. In addition, the most recent costing of this bill indicates that implementing it will actually save the government money. Today, I'm also calling on the Liberal government to adopt these measures. Due to the order of precedence or precedence of private members' business, it is very unlikely my bill will be debated, let alone come to a vote in this session of Parliament. In particular, I am extending an invitation to our current Finance Minister and Deputy Prime Minister who voted in favor of this bill when it made it to the second reading in the 41st Parliament, to swiftly introduce the measures of C-275 as a government bill so this can be addressed before the next election. I will conclude by stating that I believe that the CBTU's support on this initiative is important, and they represent more than 500,000 Canadian construction workers, and they represent a substantial portion of the country's GDP. I thank them for their work and advocacy on this matter over many years. And before I ask them to speak, I would like to invite my New Democrat colleague and friend, Alexandre Boulerice, who seconded this bill, to make some remarks, and I want to thank him for the great work that he's done. Alexandre?
Yeah, thanks Scott, and hi everybody. Je suis très heureux d'être ici avec Scott Duvall ce matin et les syndicats de la construction pour parler de ce projet de loi très important. And thank you, Scott, and all your team for all the great work you did for this bill, but also for the working class of Canada, since you are an activist and a defender of working rights, and I really appreciated to be a colleague and friend of yours. Alors, on a déposé hier ce projet de loi très important qui souhaite corriger une injustice fiscale de longue date qui touche les travailleurs spécialisés de la construction. Si ce projet de loi était adopté, puis on espère qu'il sera le plus rapidement possible, si c'est pas dans ce Parlement-là, peut-être dans un autre, que ces travailleurs-là, ces travailleuses pourraient enfin déduire de leurs revenus leurs frais de déplacement et d'hébergement, ce qu'ils ne peuvent pas faire en ce moment, ce qui est assez surprenant d'ailleurs. La nature de leur métier fait en sorte qu'ils doivent se déplacer pour aller là où le travail se trouve. Il est pas rare que ces travailleurs et travailleuses doivent être à l'emploi de différentes entreprises de construction, donc à différents endroits, les forçant à se déplacer de région en région, de ville en ville. Et ces ajustements fiscaux pourraient ainsi leur assurer une plus grande mobilité tout en leur permettant aux employeurs du domaine de la construction d'avoir accès à un bassin plus large de main-d'œuvre. Parce qu'aujourd'hui, s'ils ne peuvent pas déduire leurs frais de déplacement et d'hébergement, certains contrats ou certains chantiers peuvent être moins intéressants ou moins rentables pour les travailleurs. Donc, ils n'iront pas et ça peut pénaliser des entreprises de construction qui ont besoin de ces travailleuses-là. Puis pourtant, c'est pas quelque chose de nouveau qu'on demande parce que il existe déjà dans la loi sur le revenu une clause pour les travailleurs qui ont des dépenses liées à des déplacements pour le travail, pour les déduire de leurs revenus. Malheureusement, les travailleurs qui font leurs prestations de travail sur des chantiers sont exclus de cette clause-là pour l'instant. C'est une injustice et nous, au NPD, on pense que cette injustice-là doit être corrigée le plus rapidement possible parce que ça va permettre à ces travailleurs-là d'accepter plus de contrats, de chantiers, de travailler de manière beaucoup plus efficace avec un bassin de main-d'œuvre plus intéressant. Et la ministre Freeland s'est déjà montrée ouverte et favorable à cette disposition-là dans le passé. Et j'espère qu'elle va retenir notre proposition au NPD et qui donnerait vraiment de l'oxygène à ces travailleurs et travailleuses spécialisés dans la construction. Et ça serait bénéfique pour tout le monde, pour les ouvriers, pour les compagnies de construction, mais également à long terme pour les finances publiques et le gouvernement fédéral. Alors, merci beaucoup tout le monde. Ça me fait extrêmement plaisir d'appuyer ce projet de loi. That was my shot. And after that, back to you.
Thanks, Alexandre. And at this time, I'd like to ask the Canadian Build Trade Union to come in, Sean and Robert. And I want to thank them for all the support they've given all the tradespeople and apprentices across the country and help building to make sure we have the proper infrastructure. So I'll take it over to the building trades.
Thank you, Mr. Duvall, and thank you, Mr. Boulerice, for your comments. Good morning, everybody. My name is Robert Kucheran. I'm the chair of Canada's Executive Board of Canada's Building Trades Unions. We are an association of 14 international unions in the construction, maintenance, and fabrication industries that represent 600,000 skilled men and women from coast to coast to coast. It's a pleasure to be here today with members of Parliament, Scott Duvall and Alexandre Boulerice, and stand in support of this private member's bill that will make a difference to the lives of the men and women of the building trades. Now I'd like to introduce our Executive Director of the Canada's Building Trades Union, Sean Strickland, who works closely with the Canadian Executive Board and our 14 affiliated unions and provincial councils from coast to coast to coast. Thank you. Mr. Strickland, please.
Thank you, Robert, and good morning. It's great to see everyone today. And this is indeed a very exciting day for Canada's building trades unions and holds great promise for how our workers are treated under the Income Tax Act. And we are really proud to stand with members Duvall and Boulerice from the NDP and thank them for advancing this very important issue. And I echo MP Duvall's comments on encouraging the federal government to adopt this bill, which will address an issue of fairness for skilled trades workers in Canada. Since 1908, the Canada's building trades unions have been building our country, our roads, our bridges, our hospitals, our schools, our green construction projects, and with our 600,000 members, we've continued to do this for over 100 years. We have 60 different trades who comprise those 14 different affiliates, and we maintain and operate over $2.2 trillion worth of assets in Canada and represent about 6% of Canada's GDP. The construction industry is a very important driver for the Canadian economy. And this bill addresses an issue of fairness. And I'll give you an example. You have a worker A, let's call it the tale of two workers. You have worker A who is a salesperson. It travels to a construction site to sell conduit. That worker A has to pay for gas, meals, maybe some accommodation. All those expenses incurred in doing that business are subject to a tax deduction. You got worker B, who's an electrician, travels the same distance to the same job, incurs the same expenses as worker A, who is selling the conduit, and installs the conduit in that construction site, but yet does not receive the same income tax deductions as the salesperson. So why is the salesperson treated differently than the skilled trades worker under the Income Tax Act? Clearly, this is a question of unfairness. This is a question of justice for skilled trades workers, and we strongly believe that this fairness should be addressed by the federal government, and I really encourage them to adopt the provisions of Bill C-275. The other advantage of this bill would be to improve worker mobility. So workers right now, it's typical in construction for workers to be fairly mobile, but there's a disincentive for those workers to go from one area to another because, as I just outlined, they have to incur certain costs. And the economic recovery post-COVID is really going to emphasize some of these differences across our provinces and how busy they're going to be. Alberta right now has high unemployment in construction. Newfoundland and Labrador has high unemployment in construction. British Columbia has demand for skilled trades workers. Nova Scotia has demand for skilled trades workers. But what incentive is there for the worker in Alberta to go to British Columbia or the worker in Newfoundland and Labrador to go to Nova Scotia for work? They operate out of self-interest. After they pay all of their costs to travel to that work, including their accommodation, they're much better off economically to stay at home and collect employment insurance. So this bill will provide an incentive for workers to be more mobile and move from where there's a lack of work to an area where there is more work and help bring our labor market supply and demand back into balance. So it's a question of fairness. It's a question of encouraging worker mobility. And the other thing is the economic advantages that this bill would bring into place. We recently commissioned a report estimating the financial projections of implementing skilled trades workforce mobility tax deduction. The report by an independent auditor, and we can make this available, estimates that the federal government will save $347 million per year through increased tax revenues and a reduction in EI payments if this tax credit is implemented. Additionally, the average worker will save $2,532 a year in temporary relocation costs. Through implementing this tax policy change, the government and everyday hardworking Canadians will benefit, and we can help get Canada's economy back on track post-COVID and beyond. So to summarize, this bill will address an issue of fairness for skilled trades workers. It will improve worker mobility and address labor shortages and save the government money and be financially responsible. I'd like to again thank the NDP and members Duvall and Boulerice for bringing this important issue forward to help Canadian workers, to help the Canadian economy, and for the greater benefit of Canada. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sean, and thank you, everyone. So we're now ready to take questions from the media. Nous sommes maintenant prêts à répondre aux questions. As a reminder, to ask a question, please use the raised hand function, or you can send me a message in the chat. You will get one question and one follow-up. Pour rappel, pour poser une question, veuillez utiliser la fonction lever la main ou m'envoyer un message. Okay, so the first question is going to go to David Thurton from CBC. David, go ahead.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Mr. Duvall, I just wanted to ask, what's telling you that your private member's bill is not going to, get through, or the Parliament won't even get to the point of maybe debating it? Can you speak a bit about that?
Sure, and then thanks, David. And the reason why I'm saying that is, we have a minority government, and what's happening right now in the House of Commons and the rumor mill that's out there that there could be a snap election coming forward. I hope there's not. I hope we concentrate on the pandemic more than calling an election, that's for sure. But what I'm suggesting is this issue has been brought up back since 2006, and it always seems to die on the order paper. And it's a very, very important issue that we have to contend to with so many people saying that they have a shortage of skilled workers. So I am suggesting that if the government does decide, and who knows, there's a snap election, that they should take this on as a government bill and get it passed and get it through the House before that election is being called. If my number doesn't come up prior to that.
You know, we're in a pandemic. The traditional rules and the traditional relationships that you build in Parliament, you know, doesn't really apply. Everyone's doing things virtually. So I'm wondering, you know, what that outreach has been like to the Liberals, to Finance Minister and Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland. Have they given you any indications or any signs that this could be something that they will take on as a government bill, or maybe even put this in the budget or something like that?
So far not, David, but I am reaching out to them. I have been in the midst of writing a letter, not only talking to our finance minister and our deputy prime minister, but even to the Minister of Labour. She's also in the Hamilton riding, and suggesting that this might be a good thing to do. Because it helps everybody, and it helps the problem that we're all facing with the shortage of workers, and making it easier to have a bigger pool to pick from.
Okay, thank you, David. If anyone else has any questions, could you please use the raise hand function or send me a message in the chat. We'll do another call for questions here.
Maybe I could just add to the question from David at CBC. It's Sean Strickland, Canada's Building Trades Unions. The Liberals and the Conservatives are both aware of our work on this private members bill, and we are encouraging them to adopt this proposed legislation. So this is not going to be a surprise to those two political parties and their leadership.
Okay, thank you, Sean. So I'll just pass it back to if any of the participants have any final remarks they want to make, anything they want to add. Just go ahead and unmute yourself.
So, Charlotte, I think it's really important to the message should be out there. Not only does it help the mobility of employers to get these tradespeople, it's an incentive for people to continue to their work without taking a pay cut if they're idle because there's no work in that remote area. So it's an incentive to keep them going. Have higher pay. They will be paying their of course their income tax and their EI and their CPP. So it's an advantage to everybody. And like I said before, it's just such a no-brainer, and it should be dealt with as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you, Scott. If there are no more questions or remarks from anyone, I don't know if Sean, you were unmuted there. If you had anything to add.
No, I just would like to say that, you know, in terms of on the ground kinds of examples, if I could just emphasize that, you know, I gave the example of the salesperson and the tradesperson and how the Income Tax Act treats that trades worker unfairly compared to the salesperson who's selling the supply which the tradesperson is using to build the building. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. But the other aspect on the worker mobility is that we have high unemployment in Alberta right now, but BC is booming, and BC actually has quite a number of temporary foreign workers. So the other aspect of this I only touched on lightly is that, you know, if you encourage that mobility of our workers across provinces and within provinces, it's going to help the worker, obviously, so they're not collecting employment insurance and they're making a decent wage, but it's also going to reduce our reliance on temporary foreign workers. And so this is why I say, well, it's good for Canada. It's good for Canada on a variety of different fronts. And it just is quite surprising to me that the government has not adopted this previously. And I'm really pleased, again, that the NDP is bringing this forward. This is an important issue, and I think it's even going to be more important given the uneven recovery that we're going to experience within provinces and across provinces coming out of COVID. Oil and gas workers have taken a big hit. Energy workers have taken a big hit. What kind of incentives can we provide them to go and get some more work? This can be part of that package.
Okay, thank you so much, Sean. So if there's no further questions, we will conclude this morning's press conference. Thank you so much for attending. Ceci met fin à la conférence de presse. Je vous remercie.